Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Jason, and as always, I'm here to help you on your journey to mastering English. Whether you're a beginner or you've been learning for a while, this is the place to grow your confidence and skills. Now, today's topic is one that I know so many of you struggle with. One thing stopping you from fluency. If you've ever felt stuck or wondered why you're not making the progress you want, this episode is for you. And, of course, I'm not here alone. Joining me is my wonderful co-host, Julia. Hi, Julia. How are you today?
Hi, Jason. I'm great, thank you. And hello to all our listeners. I'm so excited about today's topic because I know it's something that really holds a lot of people back. But don't worry, we're going to break it down and give you practical tips to overcome it. So stay with us, because by the end of this episode, you'll feel more confident about taking your fluency to the next level.
That's right, Julia. And remember, if you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. All right, let's get started. So let's start by talking about what fluency actually means and why so many people feel stuck on their journey to becoming fluent. Julia, in your experience, what do most learners think fluency is?
Great question, Jason. A lot of learners think fluency is about speaking perfect English without any pauses, hesitations, or mistakes. But that's not really true. Fluency is more about being able to express yourself clearly and naturally, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
Exactly. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that you need to learn everything. Every word, every grammar rule, every pronunciation detail before you can be fluent. That's simply not the case. What's your take on that?
I completely agree. I've seen learners spend so much time trying to memorize long lists of vocabulary or stressing over grammar, but they still don't feel confident when it's time to speak. And you know why? Because fluency isn't about knowing everything. It's about using what you know effectively.
Yes, and that's where the real struggle comes in. So many learners spend their time doing things like studying alone, reading textbooks, or watching videos passively. But when it's time to actually talk, they freeze. And there's one major reason for that. Julia, do you want to reveal what it is?
Of course, the biggest thing stopping most people from fluency is fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of sounding silly, fear of being judged, and honestly, Jason, I think this fear holds back more learners than anything else.
Absolutely. And that's why we're dedicating this episode to helping you understand this fear, where it comes from, and, most importantly, how to overcome it. So if you've ever felt scared to speak English, you're not alone, and we're here to help. Let's dive in. Now that we've set the stage, let's talk about this big barrier. Fear of making mistakes. Julia, why do you think this fear is so common among English learners?
You know, Jason, I think it's because most people want to be perfect. They don't want to sound foolish or say the wrong thing, especially when they're speaking to native speakers. It's like they feel this pressure to perform perfectly, and that pressure can be paralyzing.
Exactly. And that fear often leads to hesitation. You start second-guessing yourself. What if I say the wrong word? What if my grammar is incorrect? What if people laugh at me? These thoughts can make it feel safer not to speak at all. But of course, that only makes the problem worse.
Yes, it's like being stuck in a cycle. The less you speak, the less confident you feel, and the more you avoid speaking. I've even heard learners say things like, "I'll practice speaking when my English is better." But how can your English get better if you're not practicing speaking?
That's such a good point, Julia. I've also noticed that this fear often starts in school, where mistakes are sometimes punished or corrected too harshly. Learners get used to thinking mistakes are bad, and that mindset follows them into adulthood.
Right. And it doesn't help that social media or online forums can sometimes make people even more nervous. If someone corrects their mistake publicly, it feels embarrassing. But here's the thing. Mistakes are a natural part of learning. Even native speakers make them.
Exactly. And let's not forget, mistakes are how you grow. When you make a mistake, you're giving yourself an opportunity to learn something new. But if fear keeps you silent, you're robbing yourself of that opportunity. Julia, do you have any stories or examples of learners you've worked with who overcame this fear?
Oh, absolutely. I remember one student who was so scared to speak because she thought her accent wasn't good enough. She avoided conversations for years. But when she finally started practicing, she realized that people were much more interested in what she was saying than in how she sounded. Once she let go of that fear, her confidence skyrocketed, and so did her fluency. It wasn't overnight, of course, but it was such a transformation.
I love that story. It's such a great reminder that progress is possible when you face your fears. And speaking of progress, we're going to share some practical tips to help you overcome this fear and start speaking with confidence. Ready, Julia?
Absolutely. Let's give our listeners some tools they can use right away.
Now that we understand how fear can stop you from speaking fluently, let's focus on how to overcome it. Julia, what's one of the first steps learners can take to tackle this fear of making mistakes?
The first step is to change your mindset. Remember, mistakes aren't failures. They're lessons. Instead of seeing them as something bad, think of them as stepping stones to fluency. Every time you make a mistake, you're actually learning something new.
Absolutely. And a great way to embrace this mindset is by setting small, realistic goals. For example, instead of saying, "I need to speak English perfectly," try saying, "I'll practice speaking for 5 minutes every day, no matter how many mistakes I make." Julia, do you think starting small like this can make a difference?
Definitely, Jason. Starting small helps build confidence without feeling overwhelming. And along with setting small goals, I always recommend learners create a safe space for practice. That could be practicing with a trusted friend, recording yourself speaking, or even talking to yourself in the mirror. These low-pressure activities can really help.
That's such a great point. And speaking of recording yourself, it's an incredibly powerful tool. When you record yourself, you can listen back, notice areas for improvement, and track your progress over time. Plus, it's just you and your voice. No fear of being judged by others.
Exactly. Another tip I love to share is finding a language partner or joining a conversation group. These can be online or in person. The key is to practice with someone who's encouraging and supportive. Jason, do you have any favorite platforms for finding language partners?
Yes, there are some great ones out there. Apps like Hello Talk, Tandem, or even joining English-speaking Facebook groups can connect you with people who want to practice just like you. The best part? They're often learners, too, so they understand your fears and won't judge you.
And here's another tip. Focus on communication, not perfection. Remember, the goal of speaking isn't to be grammatically perfect. It's to get your message across. Most native speakers aren't even thinking about your grammar. They're listening to what you're trying to say.
That's so true, Julia. I think learners sometimes forget that even native speakers make mistakes all the time. It's normal. So instead of worrying about grammar, try to relax and focus on the flow of the conversation.
Right. And if you're still feeling nervous, one of my favorite strategies is to prepare in advance. For example, if you know you'll be having a conversation in English, Think about the topics you'll discuss and practice some key phrases ahead of time. That preparation can make a huge difference.
Such a helpful tip. And let's not forget about the power of positive reinforcement. Reward yourself for your efforts, no matter how small. Maybe you tried speaking up in a meeting or joined a short conversation online. Celebrate that progress. Julia, do you have any final tips for our listeners?
One more. Be patient with yourself. Fluency takes time, and everyone's journey is different. Instead of comparing yourself to others, focus on your own progress. Remember, every word you speak, every mistake you make, is a step forward.
Perfectly said, Julia. So, to recap, change your mindset. Start small. Practice in safe spaces. Focus on communication and celebrate your progress. If you follow these steps, you'll be well on your way to overcoming your fear of mistakes and becoming fluent in English.
Absolutely. And remember, everyone listening, you've got this. Mistakes aren't the end of the world. They're just the beginning of learning something new.
Now, let's wrap things up with some final thoughts and a bit of inspiration for you to take with you. We've covered a lot today, but before we go, we want to leave you with a bit of inspiration. Julia, what's one final thought you'd like to share with our listeners about overcoming their fear and achieving fluency?
I'd say this. Fluency isn't about perfection. It's about connection. Think about why you're learning English in the first place. Maybe it's to travel, make new friends, or advance your career. Whatever your reason, remember that every step you take, even the small ones, brings you closer to your goal.
That's beautiful, Julia. And I'd add this. Learning a language is a journey, not a race. It's okay to stumble. It's okay to take your time. And it's okay to laugh at your mistakes. Every great speaker started exactly where you are now, with doubts, fears, and a desire to improve.
Exactly. And you're not alone. Millions of people around the world are on the same journey. The key is to keep going. Don't let fear stop you from speaking, from trying, or from growing.
Well said, Julia. So, to everyone listening, take that first step, no matter how small. Speak up in a meeting, say hello to someone in English, or even practice by yourself. Each time you try, you're proving to yourself that you can do it.
And we believe in you. Remember, fluency isn't something you wait for. It's something you work toward, one conversation, one sentence, and one word at a time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and share it with anyone who might need a little extra motivation on their English learning journey.
And don't forget to leave us a comment or question. We'd love to hear about your experiences and how you're overcoming your fear of mistakes. Until next time, keep practicing and keep growing.
Take care, everyone, and remember, you've got this. That brings us to the end of today's episode on one thing stopping you from fluency. We hope you're feeling more confident and ready to tackle your fears about speaking English.
Absolutely. Remember, every time you speak, you're making progress. Don't let the fear of mistakes hold you back, because mistakes are proof that you're trying.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for more tips and discussions about learning English. We're here to support you every step of the way.
And if you have questions, thoughts, or even success stories to share, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a comment or connect with us on social media.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Keep practicing, stay motivated, and remember, fluency is within your reach.
Take care, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Keep speaking and keep shining.